The fluorescent lights had gone dark an hour ago. Now the only light came from my monitor, a sterile blue rectangle cutting through the gloom. Outside my third-floor window, the endless parking lot dissolved into the suburban sprawl, a sea of asphalt and sodium lamps under a bruised, starless sky. This was the view Sonny laughed at, a kingdom of nothing. My finger traced the cool rim of my coffee mug. The dregs were cold. I clicked open the final file in my evening queue. An application flagged for senior review. The position was for a regional operations manager in the North Sector. A decent job, a serious job, the kind of job that required someone who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty, metaphorically speaking. The name at the top of the resume was Susan Wright. I didn't move. The cursor blinked, a patient rhythmic pulse at the end of her name. Wright. It wasn't an uncommon name, but the address listed below it, a neat little street in the manicured enclave of Crestwood Hills, was not. I knew the house. I had been there for Christmas. My own reflection stared back at me from the dark border of the screen. A pale ghost. Behind me, in the glass, the outline of my desk, neat stacks of paper, a single framed photo turned away from view. I was a fixture here, part of the worn, functional furniture of Sterling Logistics, the place my brother called the junkyard. I scrolled down. The resume was polished, full of corporate jargon and action verbs, orchestrated, streamlined, maximized. She'd spent the last decade in retail management, hopping from one dying department store to the next. Now it seemed the last of them had finally sunk. There was a 6-month gap in her employment history. I sat back in my chair. The screen flickered, and for a second, the office vanished. It was summer. The memory was so sharp it carried the scent of cut grass and chlorine. We were in Sonny's backyard, a perfect green square of suburban achievement. He stood by a gleaming stainless steel grill wearing a polo shirt the color of a crisp $100 bill. Susan was beside him, laughing at something he'd said, her smile as bright and flawless as the diamond on her hand. I was sitting on a patio chair, nursing a warm beer. "I still don't get what you do over there, Bren," Sonny had said, flipping a burger with a theatrical flick of his wrist. "Something with trucks and warehouses? All I know is I wouldn't be caught dead in a place like that. No offense." "We manage supply chains for municipal contracts, waste management, infrastructure, city maintenance," I said, my voice flat. He'd smirked, shaking his head. "Right. Garbage. My sister, the queen of the junkyard." Susan had shot me a quick, apologetic glance before her smile snapped back into place. She had said nothing. Her silence reflected his arrogance back at me, a clean surface that made it shine brighter. The memory dissolved as quickly as it came. I was back in my chair, the blue light of the monitor chilling my skin. The silence of the empty building pressed in. Queen of the junkyard. I looked at Susan's resume again, at the list of professional skills and fabricated accomplishments. She was smart. She was capable. She was also proud. Too proud to ever admit that they were in trouble. Sonny's boutique investment firm had been shedding clients for a year. I had heard the whispers from our parents. Whispers that Sonny always dismissed with a wave of his hand and a joke about the market. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could delete the file. It would vanish into a digital void, and no one would ever know. It would be flagged as an incomplete submission, a system error. Susan Wright would remain a name on a list, and she and Sonny would never have to confront the irony of her asking for a job in my world, my junkyard. But where was the justice in that? Justice wasn't about punishment. It was about holding up a mirror and making people look. I took a sip of my cold coffee, the bitter taste grounding me. Then I opened my email. I attached the PDF and typed a single name in the recipient line. Emma Turner. She was my best director, the one who handled all initial hiring for senior roles. She reported directly to me. I wrote a single line in the body of the email. Emma, please schedule an initial interview with this candidate. She looks promising on paper. I hit send. The action was done, clean and sterile. I hadn't helped. I hadn't hindered. I had simply followed procedure. I leaned back, the worn leather groaning in the quiet. Far below, a truck from our fleet turned onto the main road, its headlights cutting two sweeping arcs through the night. It was moving cargo from one place to another, fulfilling its purpose. The corner of my mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. It's just the look you have when you've set a piece in motion, and all you have to do is wait. 2 days later, Emma Turner sat across from me in my office, her tablet glowing on the polished surface of my desk. Midday sun struggled through the tinted glass, casting weak light over the room. Emma was sharp, efficient, and had a knack for seeing past the corporate polish on a resume to the person underneath. Susan Wright, Emma began, tapping the screen. She's good, confident, articulate, knows the language. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I ran a thumb over a faint scratch on my desk, a tiny imperfection in the otherwise smooth veneer. Reservations? Emma hesitated. A little. She talked a lot about culture and synergy, but when I pressed her on ground-level logistics, managing routes, handling union reps, fuel cost projections, she was more theoretical. And she seemed eager. Like this job isn't a step up, it's a lifeline. A lifeline. The word hung in the sterile air between us. It was the perfect diagnosis. People get desperate when they've been out of work for 6 months, I said. The statement is simple, factual observation. Can she learn the ground level? Yes, she's smart enough, Emma confirmed. I've got her scheduled for a second interview with the regional team leads. If they sign off, I'm prepared to make an offer. Good, I said. Keep me informed. The conversation was over. As Emma stood to leave, her reflection passed over the dark glass of a framed architectural print on my wall. A bridge Sterling had helped supply materials for. For a moment, her image merged with the steel girders. She was a tool, and a good one. Just like me. That evening, I met Kelsey at a dive bar downtown, a place of sticky floors and neon signs that cast everything in a lurid glow. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and fried food. It was the antithesis of Sonny's world. Kelsey slid a glass of whiskey toward me, the amber liquid catching the light. "You did what?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and amusement. "I passed a resume to HR," I clarified, taking a slow sip. The burn was welcome. It's what I would do for any qualified candidate. "Brenda, come on. This is Susan, Sonny's Susan." Kelsey leaned forward, her elbows on the scarred wooden bar. "This is the guy who called your MBA second tier and said your job was for people who couldn't handle the real world. Now his wife needs a job in your junkyard? You can't tell me this is just procedure." I looked at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, distorted by rows of liquor bottles. "He thinks the world is divided into winners and losers, Kelsey. He put me in one box and himself in another. I'm just giving his wife a chance to move between them. Call it a social experiment." "It's a bomb, and you just lit the fuse," she countered. "What happens when he finds out you're the one who signs off on her hiring? That you're her boss's boss? He'll have a meltdown." He won't see it that way, I said, swirling the ice in my glass. He'll see it as him having a connection on the inside. He'll think he used me. The thought was so predictable, so perfectly Sonny, that it was almost comforting. And you're okay with that? I met her eyes on the mirror. I'm okay with watching. A week later, my phone buzzed. It was late, past 10. The caller ID flashed Sonny. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice intentionally groggy. Bren, you awake? He sounded buoyant, wired. Sonny, what's going on? Big news. Susan got a job. A great job. Regional ops manager at some logistics company. Sterling Logistics. That's your place, right? Yes, that's my place, I said. I knew it. See, I told Susan, don't worry, my sister's a big shot over there. Knew you'd look out for us. He wasn't thanking me. He was taking credit. She was so stressed, but I told her the second she mentioned she was my sister-in-law, they'd roll out the red carpet. Glad to see you have some pull. I stayed silent, letting him fill the space. In the background, I could hear Susan faintly telling him to be quiet. Anyway, he continued, his voice lowering slightly. Things have been a little tight. This is a huge help. Really saves our ass. It was the closest he would ever come to admitting failure. We owe you one, Bryn. Seriously. She earned the job, Sonny, I said, my voice a flat line. Right. Of course she did. She's a star. But a little nudge from the inside never hurts, eh? That's how the world works. Is it? I asked. Good night, Sonny. I hung up before he could reply and stared at the ceiling in the dark. He thought he was moving pieces around my board. He had no idea I owned the game. 2 days later, during the quarterly senior executive meeting, I was in the main boardroom on the top floor, glass and polished mahogany overlooking the city. The agenda was acquisitions. Our CEO, a man named Peterson, was at the head of the table, a presentation glowing on the massive screen behind him. Our final item, Peterson said, clicking to the next slide, is a strategic absorption. A small local investment firm, Archer Ridge Capital, is insolvent. Their portfolio is distressed, but they hold several municipal bonds that align with our infrastructure projects. We're not buying them. We're absorbing their assets and liabilities for pennies on the dollar. Archer Ridge Capital. That was Sonny's firm. Peterson clicked again. A new slide appeared. It was an integration org chart, a web of boxes and lines showing how Archer Ridge's few remaining employees would be folded into Sterling. I found Sonny's name almost immediately. Sonny Wright, accounts manager. He was being placed in the finance division that serviced operations. His box was connected by a line to a senior manager. That manager's box was connected to a director. That director's box was connected to the regional operations manager for the North Sector, Susan's new job. And Susan's box, of course, was connected to Emma's. And Emma's was connected to mine. I stared at the screen. The lines of authority, stark and undeniable. I was not his boss. I was not even his boss's boss. I was a distant orbital power, a planet whose gravity he would now be caught in for the rest of his career. He would work to support the division managed by his wife, who got her job, her lifeline, in my company, the company he mocked, the junkyard. His entire professional existence was now a footnote in my operating budget. My reflection stared back at me from the gleaming mahogany. Perfect and clear this time.
undistorted. My face was a mask of calm professionalism, but in my eyes, something was different. Peterson looked down the table at me. Brenda, your division will be taking on the most overhead here. Any objections to the proposed structure? The room was silent. Everyone was looking at me. I could suggest a different structure. I could move him. I could save him from the exquisite, unknowing humiliation that was about to become his life. I held Peterson's gaze. No, Mr. Peterson, I said. The structure looks perfectly efficient. The confrontation didn't happen in a boardroom or an office. It happened in Sonny's world. The occasion was a housewarming party for one of his friends, a lavish affair in a white-on-white mansion that smelled of money and air freshener. 2 months since the acquisition. 2 months of Susan excelling in her role, oblivious. 2 months of Sonny simmering in his new reality. I saw him across the sprawling open-plan living room. He was standing near a floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of champagne in his hand, looking out at the meticulously landscaped garden. He looked smaller than I remembered, the expensive suit hanging just a little loose on his frame. The old, confident posture was gone. Susan was on the other side of the room, deep in conversation. She looked revitalized. She was talking about logistics, using the language of my world with a fluency that was both impressive and ironic. She caught my eye and gave me a brilliant, genuine smile. I nodded back. I wanted to see the machine I had set in motion, to stand in the same room with all the moving parts. I made my way towards Sonny, my steps deliberate. As I approached, he turned from the window. His eyes, when they met mine, were not friendly. Narrowed slits of resentment. Brenda, he said, his voice low. Enjoying the party? The question was a formality, a thin veil over the anger he was barely holding in check. It's very clean, I replied, stopping beside him. Our reflections stood side by side in the window. My simple black dress, a void next to his tailored suit. Behind us, the party pulsed with life, a silent movie of laughing, oblivious people. Don't play dumb with me, he hissed, taking a step closer. The smell of expensive champagne on his breath was sharp. I know what you did. I kept my gaze level. Susan is doing great work. Emma is very impressed with her. His laugh was a bitter, choked sound. This isn't about Susan. This is about me. They stuck me in some glorified accounting department, reporting to a guy who doesn't know a stock from a bond. I'm a ghost, a line item. My whole firm picked apart for scrap by your junkyard. It was an acquisition, Sonny, I said, my voice as calm and unyielding as the glass beside us. That's how the world works, remember? I used his own words against him, a simple act of reflection. His face flushed a dark red. You could have stopped it. You could have done something. You're some kind of senior VP over there. A single word from you. What would you have wanted me to do? Tell my CEO to pass on a sound business opportunity to protect my brother's feelings, to save the man who called my career a joke? He flinched, the truth of it landing like a physical blow. He had no answer. He just stared at me, his jaw working silently. Not a shouting match. A terrible, suffocating silence where the only sound was the thumping bass from a speaker across the room. His gaze flickered past me, toward Susan. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a picture of newfound confidence. She was thriving in the very system that was crushing him. She doesn't know, does she? he whispered, his voice cracking. That you're the one pulling the strings, that her boss answers to your subordinate, that her entire career is in your hands. I could leave him with his ignorance, with the simple narrative of corporate takeover, or I could give him the final piece, the one that would reframe his entire world, the one that would complete the mirror I had been holding up to him for months. I turned my body slightly, so our reflections in the window were perfectly aligned. My image was solid, his a wavering shadow beside it. "No, Sonny," I said, my voice dropping. "She doesn't know. She thinks she earned it all on her own. And she did. She's good at her job. I'm going to promote her. Give her more responsibility. Make her so successful in my world that she forgets she was ever part of yours." He looked hollowed out. The rage drained from his face, replaced by a gray, vacant horror. He finally understood. My revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about elevating her. Not punishment, replacement. I was making the person whose admiration he took for granted into a pillar of the institution he despised. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked from me to Susan and back again. He saw the board. He saw the pieces. He finally saw his position on it. Without another word, he turned and walked away, shouldering through the crowd. He didn't go to the bar. He didn't go outside. He walked straight to the front door and disappeared into the night, leaving his wife, his friends, and his champagne behind. I remained by the window, watching my solitary reflection. The bass thrummed through the floorboards. The party went on. I took a slow breath. The air didn't taste like victory. It tasted like cold glass. 6 months later, I was standing in the empty shell of what used to be Archer Ridge Capital. Sterling had terminated the lease, and I was doing the final walkthrough before handing the keys back to the landlord. The space had been stripped bare. Pale rectangles scarred the carpets where desks had once stood. Ghostly outlines of framed pictures dotted the walls. The air was stale, thick with the dust of a dead enterprise. It was a gray afternoon. Rain traced patterns down the picture windows, overlooking a forgettable stretch of suburban road. This was the view Sonny had chosen, the one he thought signified success. Just a different kind of parking lot. My phone buzzed. A text from Kelsey. "Drinks tonight?" I typed back, "Can't, working late." It was a lie. My work was done. But the thought of sitting in a noisy bar, of performing normalcy, felt impossible. I walked through the empty rooms. In what had been Sonny's corner office, I stopped. A piece of paper lay in the middle of the floor, a stray remnant the cleaning crew had missed. I bent down and picked it up. It was a letterhead. Archer Ridge Capital. The embossed logo, a stylized eagle clutching a bundle of arrows. Power, precision, profit. All just paper. The sound of the front door opening made me turn. It was Susan. She was holding a small cardboard box. Her expression was hesitant, apologetic. "Brenda," she said, her voice soft in the cavernous space. "Sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting. I left this here during the move out. My old office mug." "It's fine. I was just finishing up." She walked toward me, her practical heels echoing on the concrete subfloor. She looked different than she had at the party. The frantic energy had settled into quiet confidence. She wore the authority of her position like a well-tailored coat. "This place is depressing," she said, glancing around. "Hard to believe I spent 3 years dropping Sonny's lunch off here." She looked at the empty spot where his desk had been. He loved this office. He thought it meant he'd made it. She didn't seem sad. She seemed analytical. He quit, she said, not looking at me. From Sterling, last week. The news landed without impact, an inevitable outcome, a final gesture of defiance. I know, I said. I had approved the termination paperwork that morning. She finally met my eyes. Her gaze was clear, searching. Did you know he applied for a job at one of our competitors? They called me for an informal reference. This I did not know. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them the truth, Susan said. I told them he was brilliant with clients, but he struggled with the modern financial landscape, that he was from a different era of business, that he wasn't adaptable. She used the cold, precise language of a corporate assessment, the language I had taught her. She had judged him, found him wanting, and filed him away. She looked down at the box in her hands, at the mug that was the last artifact of her old life. Then she looked at me, and something unreadable passed through her eyes. Suspicion, gratitude, or maybe just a shared understanding of the world's quiet cruelties. Thank you, Brenda, she said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything. You earned it, Susan, I said. And I meant it. She gave me a small, final nod, turned, and walked out, her footsteps echoing until they were gone. I was alone again. I walked to the window that had been Sonny's and looked out at the rain. In the wet glass, I saw my own reflection. The same image from the party, from my office monitor, from the boardroom table. A woman standing alone in an empty room. Sonny was gone, a ghost in his own story. Susan was thriving. I had won. But the echo of it all wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction. Just silence. The hollow silence of an empty office at the end of a long day. I had held up a mirror to my brother, and he had shattered. But I was still here, staring at my own reflection in the pieces. I dropped the letterhead into an empty trash can, turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness, and locked the door behind me. Outside, the rain had picked up, washing the streets clean. It was time to go home, whatever that meant now.